objection, it has to be.
Well, I'm just trying to clarify what our position is.
But really, so it's up to the court whether, how you want to handle that, if you want.
Well, yeah, I know
I'm not
that.
withdrawing the objection.
You're
I
not
object
objecting,
to counsel's characterization of the testimony.
All right.
I think it's fair game, because I heard two witnesses say that the injury to the back of the head that they missed was not significant to their views, and Dr. Spitz offers a contrary view, and that it's up to the jury to decide who's credible and who they're going to believe.
Well, the ruling that I'm going to make is that, going back and remembering through the different testimonies, reviewing my notes and so forth, I do think any potential issue that was clarified and cleaned up with a follow-up question of counsel, the cause of death. So I don't find that was grossly inconsistent with the testimony that we've heard from the state's experts, so I'm going to rule that objection. Have a side minute.
Page 54.
All right, I had noted one on page 42.
And
I'm assuming you're not pursuing that one then?
That's correct.
Okay. Because getting into that one, it looked like all really he ended up doing was just using an example, like some of the other experts, to explain his position. So.
54 is the one I can see language, I think, is the reference to other cases. Is that right, Kelly?
Yes.
Okay, I can see to that and make the exercise that you think appropriate on that.
Your Honor, the state would ask that the recording be stopped right as he says, other than I need to tell you that there was a time not that long ago.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, my plan was actually to do it when you said objection, but I don't have an issue. I'm not disagreeing with yours. I was just trying to find a cleaning spot. So I don't disagree with that.
I think there was a pause there, I think.
Well, and I'm not concerned about that, because again, I'll be following along. Like I said, I know he speaks slow enough, so that's fine. So, and Mr. Pagan's not disagreeing with that break, other than I need to tell you, and I think that's fine. I wasn't that concerned about it because really there's no context, but that's fine. So where I would resume it then would be right after Mr. Pagan says, go ahead, okay, and in essence with Ms. Hiley's next question on page 55 that starts off doctor.
Yes.
Okay? All right, next.
There's one on page 59. I withdraw that objection.
That's at the very bottom?
Yes.
Okay.
Page 63. And that's the one, I know we had a conversation about this in chambers. One of the main issues I have with this, and obviously if that had been brought up either by the doctor on his own or in redirect, the state wouldn't have an objection. If we're sitting there in state's direct examination and asking the doctor about that, Mr. Pagan flips through the book, finds the page, points it out, tells him to read it, and that's just so beyond what would normally happen in a direct examination, or in the state's cross-examination. And I feel like that is additional.
I'm sorry, are you on 60?
Page 63.
I think she's referencing lines 3 through 8, or 3 through 9, I'm sorry.
$63?
Yes. Where you two kind of started getting a little bit of a back and forth about who was going to show what to the doctor.
Yeah, I mean, I had the book on my lap, so I just.
And flipped to the page.
No, I mean, I
and
didn't.
handed it to him.
No, I didn't. I didn't flip to any page because it just happened to be the page that was on my lap, because I knew I was going to get into it.
Coincidence.
So I just passed the book over to him, and he looked down and responded, because that's just happened to be the way it worked out. It was a giant book. He's 92 years old. He could barely hold it.
Well, while it may be a little procedurally abnormal, the entire situation is a little procedurally abnormal. Is there a specific evidentiary objection?
Well, Your Honor, I still disagree. I believe that a lucid interval is separate from brain swelling. I understand he
Okay, you're
ultimately
getting to,
came
you're
back
getting
to
to the
that.
second
but-
objection though on the bottom part.
Right.
I'm talking about this first part that we're talking about. In terms of Mr. Pagan giving him a book and whatever, any actual evidentiary basis for the objection. Again, I've noted the abnormality.
I guess if he had done it in redirect, and I would have objected the same way in redirect because I don't think it's within the scope of my question of brain swelling. I understand because he ended up getting all the way through and somehow coming back to it, and that's part of the problem in doing these video depositions, is that now we've gotten to listen to however long or lengthy of an explanation, and somehow he's able to tie it back. But I think realistically, without that, we wouldn't have gotten there, and I do think that the process is that was incorrect and unfair to do during the state's cross-examination.
My memory is, she asked where in the book it was, and I handed her the book. I mean, she asked where in the book, I happened to be holding the book.
And underlining something as he handed it to him.
No, I
No,
didn't.
no, hold on. I'm not going to tie up a ton of time on something like this, because really, to me, at least as I viewed it last night and as I'm reviewing the transcript, it doesn't really have a bearing on what the ultimate testimony was, at least from the casual observer that's going to be viewing this. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time digging around with this. I will go ahead and excise lines 1 through 9 on page 63. Basically, it'll go from the end of Ms. Hiley's question on page, I guess the ending part of his last answer on 62 to where he starts saying, I would have to look for it. So, preserve your objections accordingly. Now, getting back to the second part of that page 63, which I do believe to be more a substantive question, Ms. Hiley, continue your argument in terms of that.
Okay, and what line are you at? I'm sorry. And I, actually, if you would, I
We're on
wasn't
63
following.
again, and this is where he starts the answer on line 10. You do the objection for non-responsive, and then we go down from there, so.
Okay.
Well, and while you're doing that, let me maybe help you guys. Let me post what my understanding of the context was, okay? This was the point in the cross-examination where you were talking about brain swelling and, in essence, the timing of the onset of swelling. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So then on 63, you get down there on line 10, he says, I would have to look for it. It says here on page 389, this is where he starts referencing lucid interval. Lucid interval is the time that it takes between injury and clinical. You objected at that point. See, and if we were doing this in real time, I don't know that I would have had enough of the answer to rule on that objection at that point. Because as we saw with some of the state's experts, all of this really is based on how each expert defines certain terminology. So but anyway. So you objected non-responsive, the doctor finishes up, he continues on 63. It says here the likelihood of having a lucid interval depends primarily on the amount of shear injury to the brain, goes through some other factors, et cetera, et cetera. So there are different situations which govern how long the lucid interval is. Then he says, lucid interval, we get to 64, you start to object again, Mr. Pagan interjects, we eventually get back to the answer. A lucid interval is another way of saying a period during which there is no brain swelling that's measurable, that's clinically measurable, which, as I recall, the testimony of the one state's expert that actually was questioned about lucid interval, I detected a difference in how the two experts were using the terminology.
I agree.
Well,
And I think there is and I guess maybe that's the difficulty. In all of the literature regarding lucid interval, it's an onset of symptoms. not an onset of brain swelling.
Well, no, I understand that, but my point being is I don't necessarily think that's an evidentiary objection, that might be an issue of how you're arguing the credibilities or how these different experts are viewing their case. But the actual evidentiary objection was that his answer was non-responsive to the topic you were talking about. And again, I know because in real time, this probably would have played out a little differently. He does eventually there on the top of 64, lines 5 through 7, he does paint himself into a definition of lucid interval where it is responsive to the question that you had posed. Do you wish to be heard further on what you anticipate my ruling is going to be, based on what I just said?
No further argument.
Defense wish to be heard?
No.
All right, so for the reasons I have proffered on the record, then the court is going to overrule that objection. Again, this is just one of those nuances of how a deposition plays out. But again, the rationale of the ruling is that the witness does pigeonhole himself into a definition of a term that is in fact ultimately responsive to what the question was. Any other objections that you wish to address, Ms. Hiley?
I think I only saw one more.
That's what I'm showing as well. I just want to make sure it's the same.
And I don't,
one.
and I think that last one was actually Mr. Piggins.
Actually, that is right. That was on page 68, where Mr. Pagan, you had raised an objection to characterization when Ms. Hiley was doing some cross-examination on the heart rate and blood pressure from the EMT records.
I'll withdraw.
All right.
Nothing else.
Well, just so our record is clear then, let me summarize what I intend on excising from the playback. Page 15, the phraseology, because there were several episodes here, I'll excise that. Page 54 going on to 55, starting at line 14, where the doctor starts, other than I need to tell you, to approximately on page 55, 1 minute 31 seconds, 1 hour 31 minutes 27 seconds after Mr. Pagan says, go ahead, okay. Next exercise, page 63, lines 1 through 9. Actually, probably cleaner for the jury that we get rid of all that in terms of the back and forth between counsel in terms of the book. Now, what I'm going to do at lunchtime, because I'm assuming this is not going to be played at lunch, is that I will take this into my office. I will find specifically the timestamps that match these, so I know exactly where we'll hit and so on. When we do the playback, as long as the cursor is kept on the right spot on the video, it'll keep the time stamp up through the entirety. So as long as I'm able to see that, this will work very smoothly. Okay?
Thank you, Judge.
All right, anything else we need to address them before we bring our jury in?
How about the video?
About anything else in judge?
Not that I know of.
Ms. Hiley?
No.
Ms. Hiley, you have that back at your copy of the. And Ms. Wilson, if you'd like to check for our jury, if everybody's here, just bring one in.
Bring them in, they're all here.
All right, everyone, have a seat. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Please place your lanyards on. As always, I have to begin our day by asking about your admonitions, any issues that need to come to the court's attention. Wonderful. We are still in the midst of the state's case, and Chief, is stay ready to call this next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the state calls Jason Weshy.
please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes. Have a seat. Watch your step, please.
All right, good morning, sir. I do need to advise you, as you can see, we have media folks here. They might be recording portions of this. Do you object to them using your facial image on the news?
No, sir.
All right, very good. Ms. Hiley, you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm going to need you to keep your voice up just a little louder. I'm having trouble hearing you back here.
Good morning.
Thank you. Would you state your name for the record, please?
Jason Wesche,
Could you spell your last name?
W-E-S-C-H-E.
Jason, do you know Hannah Wesche?
Yes, ma'am.
How did you know her?
She was my daughter.
What was her date of birth?
1/11/15.
And I want to come back to that in just a minute, but the first thing I want to address with you is you have a 2008 conviction for unauthorized use of property, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was a misdemeanor conviction?
Yes, ma'am.
Where was Hannah born?
In Louisville, Kentucky.
Did she have any difficulty at her birth?
She was addicted to drugs at birth.
And tell me about that process at birth and how long she was in the hospital and what happened from there.
She was in, Cozaire Children's Hospital in Louisville for 92 days. She was weaned off of methadone by morphine.
Where did she stay while she was in the hospital there?
In the NICU, the intensive care unit.
And with that, can you describe what type of care she needed?
She had different kind of tubes. She just had to have medicine to come down and wean her from the medicine that she was on to keep her from heroin. Her mother was addicted to heroin. So when her mother got arrested, the jail put her on methadone to keep the baby alive instead of withdrawing instantly from heroin. So in the hospital, they wean them off the heroin, and it takes quite some time.
What was your contact with Hannah while she was in the hospital?
I would drive to Cozaire's hospital in Louisville and see her 3 or 4 times a week.
Did you then take custody of Hannah upon her release from the hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
And how old was she then?
She was 3 months old.
What was Hannah's mom's name?
Adrienne Latham.
And upon Hannah's release from the hospital, did her mom have contact with her?
Very seldom. She was in a drug rehabilitation center in Kentucky. I would take her over there once a week and she would see her.
Was there a point where Hannah really didn't have contact with her mother anymore?
After May of 2017, she didn't have any contact with her again. It was off and on up until then.
Who had custody of Hannah throughout that time?
I did.
I'm going to ask you to just keep your voice up. It's starting to drop a little bit, okay?
I had custody of Hannah.
Did Hannah have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, she has 2 sisters, which are my other 2 daughters, and she has a stepbrother in Dayton. I've never met him.
So you said she has 2 sisters that are your other 2 daughters?
Yes, ma'am.
What are their names?
Caitlin Wesche and Rachel Wesche.
And how old is Caitlin?
Caitlin's 18.
And how old is Rachel?
Rachel's 12.
Do they have the same mom as Hannah?
No, they don't.
How often would Hannah have contact with her sisters?
Every weekend
And where would that contact happen?
at my house.
You said she also has a stepbrother that you've never met?
Yes, Adrienne has a son. I believe the grandmother has custody of her other son.
Do you know if Hannah had ever met him?
No, Hannah's never met him either.
As of March 8th, 2018, where were you living?
At 4004 Shank Road in Hamilton.
It's a City of Hamilton address.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware whether or not that's in Butler County, Ohio?
Yes, ma'am. I believe it is.
If I may approach the witness with State's Exhibits 86 and 87, which have previously been admitted.
You may.
If you want to go ahead and take a look at those. I'm going to go ahead and put them up on the screen there next to you. If you could circle your address that you said was is your address shown in State's Exhibit 87?
Yes, it is.
And if you could go ahead and circle that. You have to push pretty hard. Oh, there it is. It's working. Okay,
Oh.
great.
Yeah, it showed on here on my
Okay.
screen.
And that's the 4004 Shank Road address?
Yes, ma'am.
There is another house that is seen in that picture. Whose house is that?
That is Lindsay and TJ's home.
Approximately, what is the distance between your home and their home?
300 feet?
When did you move in to the 4004 Shank Road address?
End of July. I believe it was July 28th.
Of what year, if you recall?
I'm sorry, 2017.
And who did you live there with?
Hannah. It was just me and Hannah that lived there on a permanent basis.
All right.
My children were there on the weekends.
And your children being your two daughters that you've already described?
Caitlin and Rachel, yes, ma'am.
If I may approach the witness with State's Exhibits 132 through 149 after showing them to counsel.
You may.
All right, you've had the opportunity to look through all of those?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you able to recognize those?
Yes, ma'am.
What are they of?
My house.
Are they true and accurate depictions of the way your house looked on March 8th of 2018?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, permission to admit and publish?
No objection, Your Honor.
132 through 149 will be admitted. You may publish whenever you wish.
State's Exhibit 132, what is that showing?
My house.
And we saw the Exhibit 87. Actually, what's the view from? Where would you be standing to be able to see this?
That is in the front yard. Looks like it's up towards the road. At the front of the house.
Oops, sorry. Let me switch that. I don't know why that's coming up wrong.
I blanked it out before the jury.
Thank you. State's Exhibit 87. Where would you, if you can mark on there where you would be standing for that view of the home?
Right about there. Can you see that?
Yes. I keep looking at the wrong screen, so I apologize. Yes, I can see that. Thank you. All right, State's Exhibit 133. What is that showing?
That is my living room.
And there's a door there to the left. What is that door?
That is the front door.
On State's Exhibit 132, can you mark which door that would be, if it's on there? $134.
That is my living room as well, and that is my bedroom door on the other side.
If you could mark where you're pointing to. All right. And the other door in that picture?
Is the front door again.
135,
Is my couch in my living room.
136,
It's the hallway that leads to 2 bedrooms. Or, I'm sorry, 1 bedroom.
and what else is down that hallway?
1 bedroom, a bathroom, and the utility room.
137,
It was a bedroom. Same bedroom.
138,
It is the same bedroom.
139,
That is the closet in that bedroom
140,
or bathroom.
141,
Is the bathroom vanity underneath.
and there's training pants here, at least I believe that's what that says.
Yes.
Who are those for?
Hannah.
$142,
That is my kitchen.
this door that we see in this picture, where does that lead to, or what direction does that face?
That is directly behind the house. It's the back door. Goes into the backyard.
143,
Is my kitchen.
and through the archway,
Leads into the living room.
144,
It's my refrigerator.
145,
That is another little bedroom in the house.
and who would sleep in that bedroom?
Caitlin would sleep in there sometimes.
146,
That is my bedroom.
147,
My bedroom.
148,
That is my dresser inside of my bedroom.
149,
Inside of my dresser.
whose bedroom was this?
It was technically the girls, but they used it more as a playroom. Hannah always slept in my bed, so she never slept in there. Her and Rachel played in it mostly.
Jason, was the house on March 8th, 2018, is that the condition the home was in on that day?
Yes.
I believe you said you moved into that house in July of 2017, is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Yes.
And when you moved into that house, what were the arrangements? Either for, had you purchased the house?
I was renting it from my boss,
And who was your boss?
Jay Smith.
And so you were renting the house from Jay Smith, and what were your arrangements? And then, sorry, you said he was your boss.
Yes.
So he was your boss for what?
I worked for his company, Smith Corp.
And what did you do?
I was a pipe fitter. We put new sewer lines in the state of Kentucky, mostly. I worked as a mechanic in the garage as well.
So tell me about, you said you worked in the state of Kentucky.
Yes.
Typically.
Yes.
Tell me about a typical day of work for you. Beginning in the morning when you would wake up to when you would come home. And you don't have to go through everything in detail, but where did you go? What did you have to do? How long you were there?
It varied. Usually in the morning, I'd get up, get ready. I would wake Hannah up, get her ready, take her to Lindsay's. I would go to work. Usually I drove a work truck, so I'd get my work truck. We bounced around job to job in Kentucky, depending on what location we were working on that day. Usually I would get off about 5 o'clock, 5:30 sometimes, and then depends on traffic. I'd usually get back home about 6:30, sometimes 7 o'clock.
Was there a specific time you had to be on the job site?
7 o'clock.
You had to be.
Well,
Okay.
If I wasn't driving a company truck, I left earlier because I had to be at the job at 7. If I drove the truck, I started at 7 from the shop.
And you said you would drop Hannah off at Lindsay's. Who is Lindsay?
Lindsay was the babysitter. This is Lindsay Partin.
And can you describe what she's wearing? I know you pointed her out.
She is in a dress. I'm not really sure what the designs are. Flowers, maybe?
I asked that the record
Necklace.
reflect. Thank you. I asked that the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant.
They reflect.
And how did that arrangement happen?
When I started at Smith Corp, I drove Hannah other places for a babysitter, and it was usually about an hour away. And Lindsay babysat other children and had her children as well. TJ said that he would ask if she could babysit Hannah, and he said it was fine, that she said she would watch Hannah as well. So we came up with arrangements for her to babysit.
And who is TJ?
TJ is Lindsay's husband, or I thought that he was her husband.
Okay. So, and did TJ have any relationship to you with work, or was he just somebody you knew?
He was just, he was the owner's son. He worked on a different crew. I would see him in the shop, I'd see him around. He was my neighbor. But other than work, we did not have any interaction.
And you talked about sometimes you would have to get your truck from the shop, I believe you said?
Yes, a work truck.
Show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 86. And that should be coming up here on the screen shortly. All right, State's Exhibit 86. Is your house shown on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you go ahead and circle that? And if you could identify and at least put a mark on whatever other house you're talking about as to whose houses and what they are on that Shank Road stretch heading towards the top of the page.
Okay. This house would be Lindsay's house and TJ's house. This house is the owner of the company, J. Smith's, and that is our shop. And there's a barn on the right side.
And you said you would have to go get your truck, so where would your truck be?
My truck is always parked right there.
What was the babysitting arrangement? Was it every day? Were there specific hours? How was that arranged?
She watched her Monday through Thursday. On Fridays, Hannah went to another babysitter.
And when you say she, are we talking about the defendant?
I'm sorry, yes, Lindsay watched her Monday through Thursday.
And you said on Friday she would go to another babysitter?
My friend Sandy would babysit her on Fridays. Lindsay wanted to keep Fridays open for her and her children.
I want to direct your attention to Friday, March 2nd, which would have been approximately a week prior to the March 8th incident that we're here for. Friday, March 2nd, who watched Hannah that day?
That would have been Sandy.
And at that point in time, Friday, March 2nd, were there any visible injuries on Hannah that you recall?
Not that I recall.
Were you asked to find a photograph of Hannah as close in time as you could to the March 8th date?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you able to do that?
Yes, ma'am.
If I may approach the witness after showing the counsel State's Exhibits 130 and 131.
You may.
Are you able to recognize those?
Yes, ma'am.
And what are those?
Those are pictures of my daughter, Hannah.
State's Exhibit 130, what is that?
It is a picture of my daughter, Hannah, in a car seat.
And is there a date and time on that?
March 3rd, 2018.
Where did that picture come from?
I believe she took that picture herself. Or no? We were in the car. I'm not sure exactly where I was going or what we were doing, but I know we were driving in the car because she's in her car seat.
Was there there was a date and time on that? How does that date and time generate? Was that posted to somewhere? Was that part of the picture? How did that happen?
It was just on my phone. It came off of my Google account. It was saved onto my Google account.
And are those true and accurate depictions of Hannah as of March 3rd of 2018?
Yes, ma'am.
Permission to admit and publish States Exhibits 130 and 131.
No objection.
All right, they'll be admitted, you may publish.
And that's Hannah in her seat.
Yes, ma'am.
States Exhibit 131. Close up of the same picture.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's move on to Monday, March 5th of 2018. Did Lindsay watch Hannah on that day?
If it was not raining, she did. When it rains, we didn't work. I honestly don't remember if it rained that week or not.
What was your process in the mornings for when you got up and when you headed over to Lindsay? Would you do anything to let Lindsay know that you were coming, or would you just show up? How did that work?
I would text her before I walked out of the door. When I dropped Hannah off when it was cold, I went around to the back door of the garage. So I would text her before I left so she had time to get up and come and meet me in the garage.
And if you were working on Monday, March 5th, would you have texted her that morning?
Yes, ma'am.
And to the best of your knowledge, what would the content of that text have been?
It's usually, I'm coming over, I'm on my way, be there in a minute. I was just letting her know that I was getting ready to come over.
Between Monday, March 5th and Thursday, March 8th, were you aware of Hannah receiving any injuries?
Yes.
And how did you become aware of that?
Lindsay told me after I picked Hannah up.
Did that happen one day, multiple days? How many times were there conversations about injuries that Hannah had that week?
She fell in the driveway. I want to say 3.
Well, tell me, to your recollection, what injuries do you recall Hannah having in those days leading up to March 8th, and what Lindsay told you about those?
She had little bruises all over her chest and a pretty bad scrape on the chin. When I picked her up, Lindsay said that her and her daughter Vivian were playing in the driveway and Hannah had tripped over the heel of her boot and fell on the rocks. She had a bruise on her chin and a black eye. One day, Lindsay said that she had stepped up on top of a toy on wheels, and the toy kicked out from underneath of her, and she fell on the handlebar. She fell on a step too, but I can't recollect if she told me that week or not about that.
If I may approach the witness with previously admitted exhibits 41, 42, 44, 45, 46, 48, 51, 52, 65. And I think that that's all I need at this point.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Actually, 49 as well, I'm sorry. Go ahead and look through those, and if you could keep them in the numerical order as best as possible, that would help us. All right, are you able to recognize those photos?
Yes, ma'am.
And what are those of?
My daughter, Hannah.
Did you have the opportunity to see your daughter in that condition?
Yes, ma'am.
And when did you see her in that condition?
At the hospital
Would that have been on March 8th of 2018?
on March 8th. Yes, ma'am.
All right, some of the injuries that you described, Lindsay giving you an explanation for, are those shown in those photographs?
Yes, ma'am.
At this point, I'd like to go through these photographs with the witness.
You may.
All right, State's Exhibit 41, if you could go ahead and mark the injuries that you had previously seen prior to March 8th of 2018 and explain what was told to you by the defendant about what happened.
These are the bruises that she said she got when she fell on the driveway, and on her chin right there as well.
Do you recall when you were told about those?
After I picked her up from work.
Do you recall which day that would have been?
That would have been, I'm not sure. Monday or Tuesday, it was in the beginning of the week when I was told about those.
.42?
That is an injury on her chin from where she said she fell on the rocks.
Would this be the same, I'm sorry, let me figure out a better way to ask that question. This photo and State's Exhibit 42, does the injury look the same, different than when you first saw it?
It's a lot more bruised than when I first saw it.
Prior to the morning of March 8th of 2018, did you look at that? Or early in the morning of March 8th, 2018, did you see that?
Yes.
Did it
Yes.
look that bad on the morning of March 8th prior to you dropping her off?
No.
State's Exhibit 43, I don't think you have in front of you. State's Exhibit 44. It's also showing something on the left side.
The bruising, yes.
Is that something you had seen prior to you dropping her off on March 8th?
No.
State's Exhibit 45, same thing.
Yes, ma'am.
State's Exhibit 46.
That is where she said she fell on the toy and hit the handlebar of the train.
If you could go ahead and circle what you're talking about when you say that.
I'm sorry.
And is that approximately the way it looked on March 8th, 2018, when you dropped Hannah off?
Yes.
There is a marking on the left side of the cheek. Was that there when you dropped Hannah off?
I don't recall that being there.
.47. Did you see her ear that morning on March 8th of 2018 prior to dropping her off?
Yes, it was not bruised like that.
State's Exhibit 49. The mark on the forehead, do you recall seeing that prior to dropping Hannah off on March 8th of 2018?
No.
State's Exhibit 51.
The bruises are from the driveway, is what I was told when she fell.
Let's see. Do you have State's Exhibit 65 there in front of you? Should be towards the back.
Yes, ma'am.
State's Exhibit 65. Do you recall seeing any of that prior to dropping Hannah
Yes.
off on March 8th? And what do you recall seeing?
The mark on the top
If you could
was,
go ahead and circle that on the screen. Do you recall when you would have seen that?
I got her out of the bath. Let's see. It was Monday or Tuesday. I'm not sure exactly on which day. It was in the beginning of the week.
The other bruise down below, had you seen that one?
I don't recall seeing that bruise.
State's Exhibit 53. Do you recall seeing any of that bruising? Let me clear this. Any of that bruising when you had gotten her out of the bath?
No.
Prior to the morning of March 8th of 2018, when you dropped Hannah off, were you ever aware of a bruise or pain that Hannah expressed to the back of her head?
No, not the back of her head.
I want to direct your attention to Wednesday, March 7th of 2018, which would be the night before, or the day before.
Yes, ma'am.
Had Lindsay watched Hannah that day?
Yes.
And do you recall what time you picked Hannah up that day?
It was about 7 o'clock. Excuse me. It was a late night that night. It was about 7 o'clock p.m.
And when you picked Hannah up, were you given any information about any injury that she received that day?
Yes, that's when she told me she fell on the train.
And that would be the black eye that you circled.
Yes, ma'am.
What did you do after that?
After that, I ended up I had a friend of mine stay at my house, and I dropped him back off at his apartment that night.
And where would that have been?
in Fairfield, Ohio, at Cobblestone Grove.
Where'd you go after that?
I came back home.
You remember telling detectives you went to go get milk?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Did you do that?
No, ma'am.
Why'd you tell them that?
I thought I did. I was just confused. I mean, at the time I was being questioned, I was focused on my daughter. I meant to get milk. I thought I did. I didn't. I ended up going back home after I dropped him off.
When did you realize you'd taken a friend home?
Sunday,
Sunday when?
this past Sunday, I was talking to him on the phone, and we were talking about my daughter, and that was the last time he saw her. So he told me that he saw her. I took him home.
We can't describe what his friend is telling you.
Sustained to the extent that you relate, you're not allowed to say what somebody else would have told you.
Yes, sir.
All right, go ahead.
Based on what he told you, did that remind you of something?
Object to leading.
Was it explaining the pieces of his understanding before?
Can you try to reword it?
What caused you to realize that you had taken your friend home that night? Without giving me any statements directly that somebody made.
When I was talking about my daughter, things are just, let's see. I'm really not sure how to say that without,
Did that conversation help to refresh your memory as anything?
yes, ma'am.
And as to what? What was that?
Where I went that night, I was confused on where I went. I thought I went to got milk. I knew I left. I thought I got milk. I did not.
So you're saying you took your friend to Fairfield.
Yes, ma'am.
Approximately how long does that take?
It takes about 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back. Depends on traffic, say an hour, hour 15 minutes.
What'd you do then? After you took your friend to his apartment?
I came back home, and me and Hannah went inside and laid on the couch.
Then what?
Then we went to sleep.
Did you stay on the couch all night or did you go into a bedroom?
We slept on the couch that night.
What did you do the next morning?
I got up, got ready for work. I got Hannah up. She brushed her teeth, got dressed. She liked to dress herself, so she puts her own clothes on. She ate, and then I was putting her coat on. I texted Lindsay and told her that I was on my way over. I went over and dropped Hannah off, gave her hugs and kisses, and headed down towards my truck. I got out of my truck to start it, and I had a missed phone call from Lindsay. When I got back in my car, she had called me back and told me something was wrong with Hannah, that I had to come back.
All right, so I want to talk to you that morning about that morning. You said she likes to get herself dressed.
Yes.
She brushed her teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Do you help her brush her teeth? She does that on her own.
I help her. She likes to do it on her own, but I still help her.
You said she ate.
Yes.
Do you recall what she ate?
It would have been cereal.
What happened then? After eating?
Then she got dressed and we were getting ready to proceed to head over to Lindsay's.
And you talked about sending messages at some point to Lindsay.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you do that morning?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall what time you sent that message?
It was right before we left. I was in the middle of putting her coat on when I texted Lindsay.
Do you recall what the specific time on a clock would have been?
Not exactly. Probably around 10 till 7. maybe 5 till 7, somewhere in there. It was right before 7 o'clock because I get my truck at 7 o'clock.
With looking at phone records regarding a time of a text, would that help to refresh your recollection?
Yes, ma'am.
If I may approach with State's Exhibit 128.
You may.
You may approach, Your Honor.
Same. It's the same objection from yesterday. You handle it.
Ms. Hiley, you may proceed pursuant to our cycle.
Thank you. Approaching with State's Exhibit 128.
Your Honor, I believe, can we approach?
No, Ms. Hiley, I think, do the foundation part first before we get to that.
Oh,
Thank you. I think that's where you're going, Ms.
It was, thank you. Can you read mine?
Jason, what was your phone number as of March 8th of 2018?
513-806-8005.
Now, if I may approach with State's Exhibit 128.
You may.
Are you able to see your phone number within that record? Go ahead and flip through the pages.
Yes, ma'am.
And phone number you just gave us?
Yes, ma'am.
And how are you labeled within that?
Jason Weshy, but my last name is spelled incorrectly.
How is it spelled within the records?
It's spelled W-E-L-S-C-H-E. There is no L in my name.
And you see text messages within that, within those records?
Yes, ma'am.
Ones that you would have sent or received?
Yes, ma'am.
You recognize those that are attributed as coming from you to be statements or texts that you sent?
Yes, ma'am.
Specifically looking at 7637, that's the page number at the bottom right-hand corner. Should be towards the back.
Yes, ma'am. I'm
Do
on it.
you have that?
Yes, ma'am.
What day is that from?
March 8th, 2018
And does it say what time you sent your message?
at 6:52 a.m.
And who was that to?
Lindsay Partin,
And what was the message?
getting ready to head over.
And did you receive a response?
Yes. She said, okay,
And what time was that?
6:52.
All right. You can go ahead and close that. You said you sent that message as you were getting ready to head out the door. Walk
Yes.
us through that process of leaving.
Right before we leave, I put Hannah's coat and shoes on. They're sitting, we usually sit on that little footstool that's sitting there by the wall. Put her coat and shoes on, I text Lindsay, and we head out.
Where did you go at that point?
To my car and drove over to Lindsay's house.
How do you put her in the car?
Typically, she sits up front, but that morning she laid in the back seat.
And is that always how she rides in your car?
No.
Why does she ride in your car that way?
Why did she? I'm not sure. It was not common for her to. Usually when I go to Lindsay, she wants to sit in my lap because she liked to drive. But that morning she didn't want to get in the front seat. She wanted to lay in the back seat.
And how far is it for you to get there?
About 300 feet.
And is this a main road that you travel to get there?
No, it's a private lane. It's a private gravel lane.
And what do you do once you get to, what did you do that morning once you got to Lindsay's then?
We got out of the car. When I took her in, I gave her hugs and kisses. And that morning was a little different because she kept asking for a kiss over and over and over again. And then they went inside and I went down to my shop. I started my truck.
Gene, how did you bring Hannah into the home? If you recall specifically that
I
day.
was carrying her. I had a blanket over her.
And where did you take her into?
The back door of the garage.
And where did you leave her?
In the garage.
Who did you leave her there with?
Lindsay Partin.
And how did Lindsay take her from you? Did you hand her over so Lindsay was carrying her? Did you set her down? How did that work? If you recall.
I want to say I set her down, but I could have handed her to Lindsay and she set her down. I know they walked in the house when I walked away. I can't recall if I handed her to Lindsay because she was really wanting to kiss me. I don't know if I handed her to her and then she set her down or if I set her down. But they walked in the house.
Let's show you what's been previously admitted, State's Exhibit 2. Do you need to see it, Ms. Howard?
No, I don't, no, thank you.
Where did that exchange take place?
Right inside of, where are we at here? Right inside of this door. That is the back door going outside. And that's the door I bring her in. So we were about right there.
Now, did you actually see them go into the house from the garage, or did you just know that they were heading in that direction?
I know they were headed that way. I turned around and headed back to my car.
And once you got in your car, where did you go?
I went down to the shop to warm up my truck.
Going to display State's Exhibit 86. Walk me through what you did from the moment you walked out of that garage door at Lindsay's house.
I got in my car, I parked in this driveway, and then I drove down to the shop, and my truck was over there, and I stopped my car right there. I got out and started my truck. It was cold that day, so I got back in my personal vehicle to let my truck warm up. And that's when I got this phone call from Lindsay.
Once you got the phone call from Lindsay, what did you do?
I raced back up to her house.
Did you take the truck, the car?
I took my car. The truck was still running. I left the truck running. I was already back in my car when she called.
What was the speed that you drove back?
I'm not sure. It was fairly fast. Typically, everybody goes slow down because it's a gravel drive and they ask them to go slow, but I came back pretty quick.
Is that different than the way you went down to go start your truck?
Yes, ma'am.
What happened once you got back?
I walked in, Hannah was on the floor, not in the garage or in the kitchen, there was a room in between when you first walked in. I leaned down and I was trying to tell her to breathe because she wasn't really breathing. I ended up picking her up and taking her into the garage and laying her on the couch. Lindsay was kind of walking around asking what she should do. I told her to call 911, and then she called 911.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 105. It's been previously admitted. Does that picture, State's Exhibit 105, show where you found Hannah?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you go ahead and show us on that screen there in front of you? And you said then you picked her up,
Yes, ma'am.
and I believe you said you moved her to the couch.
In the garage, yes, ma'am.
State's Exhibit 2, show that couch.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me about what happened once you got Hannah to the couch.
She was kind of gasping for air. She wasn't really breathing. I kept telling her to breathe, and when I'd tell her to breathe, she'd take a breath and then let it out slow, and then she wouldn't take another breath until I yelled at her or I said her name, and then she'd take another breath, and then it would come out slow. And then 911 EMS showed up, or the ambulance came.
And what happened at that point?
They came in and they took over. They ended up getting Hannah on a stretcher, and we left. We went to Fort Hamilton Hospital.
Who's we?
Well, I drove my own car. I followed the ambulance. So the EMS, or the ambulance drivers and the first responders, and then I followed them in my vehicle.
And then what?
We went into the hospital. They were saying that it looked like she might have blood on the brain. I thought she had an aneurysm. Lindsay showed up a little bit later, and we were in the hall just waiting to hear what was going on. They ended up air carrying her to Children's Hospital from there, and I drove to Children's.
Did you speak to any detectives while you were at Fort Hamilton Hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
And after that, then did you go to Children's?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me, to your knowledge, what then happened at Children's?
Once I got to Children's, we were just waiting. By the time I got there, they already had Hannah rushed into brain surgery. We were just kind of hanging around waiting to hear from a doctor. The detectives were there. They were talking to me off and on.
Did Hannah ever regain consciousness?
No, ma'am.
When did she die?
On March 18th, 2018.
We've seen some pictures of Hannah following an organ procurement. When was that decision made?
That was around the 7th day she was in the hospital. We were pretty much told that she wasn't going to make it. They had to wait for the drugs that she was on from the hospital to wear off so they could do exams, but she was already brain dead.
Did you have any contact with Lindsay other than at Fort Hamilton Hospital on that day or the following day?
She came down to Children's Hospital to pray with the family that Hannah was going to be okay.
Do you recall when that would have been?
That was Thursday night.
If I may have just a moment.
Take your time.
I have no further questions.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I know we've been going at it for about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 20 minutes up to this point. I'm going to use this as a 10-minute break, let you guys stretch, use the restroom, whatever, then we'll get into the cross-examination. So please leave your notepads, please remember your admonitions. Mr. Weshy, you are free to stretch, use the restroom, whatever you need to do. Just remember you are under oath and you're not permitted to talk to any of the witnesses.
Yes, sir.
So about 10:30, be back outside there and we'll get rolling and get into the cross-examination. Okay?